this Hangout on air is live, so apparently we're live. Right, I'd just like to, when I get it to my face, welcome everybody to this little Hangout I've got going with Clare Mackintosh. Myself and Clare have known each other for about 6 years-ish, something like that. Both met in, I know, count back. I think it was 2009, is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yep. Makes us feel really old. In the blogging community, where I stayed fairly static and carried on blogging, and Clare has followed her dream and become a best-selling author, and I think that's it in a nutshell. Am I right with that, Clare?
I want to agree with what you just said, except that you crackled and I didn't hear any of that, so all I got was that in a nutshell. So I'm just going to agree with you and say yes, right. Probably.
Yeah, it was it was more about I've stayed static with blogging and you followed your dreams and become a best-selling author.
Well, I have followed my dreams, and oddly my book is now, which all seems a bit surreal. I wouldn't say you've stayed static. I've watched your blog develop and seen your social media presence grow to something really akin to a brand. So I don't think you've stayed static, but I'll go with the way you describe me anyway.
That's brilliant. I just really wanted to just have you sort of mention where you've come from, how you have, how this debut novel of yours has evolved, and I mean, this is the first week it's been in the Sunday Times bestseller list, and for me to have watched all this happen from the sidelines, I'm absolutely amazed, and I'm really proud to be able to call you a friend. And I just think it's such an amazing, sort of experience for you, and what have you. So I just want you to sort of like give a potted version of how that has happened and how long it's taken.
Well, so I started blogging in 2009, which, as you say, is when we met. And I started a blog called More Than Just a Mother, and it was because I was at home with 3 children under 15 months. I was feeling quite isolated. I was feeling as though I'd lost my identity a bit, which might sound strange to anyone listening that isn't a mother, but probably those can understand that you do lose your identity. And so I wanted to write about me again, and so I wrote a blog that was a real mixture of funny things, and I wrote a lot about grief, or wrote a lot about postnatal depression. I'd lost one of my sons, so I had 2 sets of twins in 15 months, and my first set of twins, 2 boys, one of them died when he was 5 weeks old. He had meningitis. And I wrote extensively about that. And it probably doesn't surprise anyone to know that there is a strong theme of grief in my first novel, in Let You Go. So I was writing years later. It got to the point where I felt I couldn't hold a job and also be the sort of parent that I wanted to be. I was working as a police officer. I was an inspector doing operations. I could keep money coming in, and the only thing I knew how to do was to write. So I had money through, and then I started seeing. I got a couple of columns, and then I wrote my book.
Brilliant. Well, I asked for a potted version, and that's exactly what I got. No, that's fine.
It does make it sound very easy. I didn't just write my book. I wrote my book and I sweated over it for 18 months, and then I got a lucky break, and somebody, in fact, it's not the first book I've written. I wrote a sort of a funny rom-com type book about parenting, and that was enough to get me some interest from an agent, and I worked with them for a bit, but it wasn't the right book for me. I wanted to write something a bit grittier, and when I wrote I Let You Go, I really did have a lucky break, and I was introduced to my current literary agent, who took me on and sold my book. And I've spent the last 2 years really editing this book, getting it ready for publication. So it has it's a lot shorter than some people's journey to publication, a lot more straightforward. I've been really lucky that I haven't had the endless submitting and rejection letters and all the sorts of things that really knock your confidence. But even so, this book has been 3 years, I suppose, in the making. It's taken a long time to get onto the shelves.
Yeah, and from my point of view, watching all this happen, this process, it feels like it's been a long time, because I remember you talking about it explicitly right from the beginning. And as I keep saying, I've watched your journey from start to end, not the end, but such like the publication of the book. No, definitely not. I hope not as well. But it does feel like, especially with some writers that I follow on social media, and I follow their blogs and I follow their progress, it seems that a book is written and then it's produced. And whether it's because I've had that previous relationship with you as a blogger, and I've sort of seen the whole process, it feels to me like it's been a work in progress for a long time. But when you explain it like that, it all completely and utterly makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I sold my book in April or May 2013. So the ebook came out 18 months later. The paperback came out 2 years after that. And that is quite a long time. That there was about a year of editing, and it did need a lot of work. It's a really difficult book structurally. There are some technical elements in it that had to work in order for twists to work, in order for the suspense to be there. And so it was quite a complicated book to write. It wasn't linear. And also there's an element of wanting a book to come out at the right sort of time. So one of the things that I've done is founded a literary festival, and it made sense for my paperback to come out at the same time as my Lit Fest, which was in April. So far better it came out in April rather than, say, January. So there are things like that mean it takes a bit longer.
Yeah.
I also think I'm such a chronic oversharer that I will say, the second I've got good news, the second I've got a publishing deal, or I've got an agent, or I've finished a book, it's out there, on Twitter, on Facebook for everyone to see. Whereas perhaps other authors are a bit more sensible, a bit more circumspect, and they release their news, at a sensible time frame, so that 2 weeks later their book comes out, rather than everyone then waiting for 2 years.
But again, it's helped me feel involved in the process as well. I just noticed you held your book up then. Very good publicity for you there. I know you're very well trained in your PR there. But what I wanted to know was, it's either a butterfly or a moth on the front cover. What is the significance of that?
I don't know. When you do English A-level and you read, or GCSE, and you read a text and then you talk about the meaning of it all, and I always used to sit there and think, well, yeah, but did the author really think all of that, or are we just putting it in? And I feel a little bit like that about book covers, that after the event you can decide on lots of reasons why things are there. I love my cover. It's the second cover that I've had. And can I show you the first cover?
Yeah, please do, definitely.
Hang on, it's just here. Hang on, I'm going to get it.
I was just going to say, the reason I was asking about the cover is because I've read the book on Kindle. You don't tend to see the cover so much, because when you open your Kindle book, when you first download it, it flips near enough to the first page, and you have to go back a couple of pages to see the cover.
Yeah.
And I think with Kindle, I'm on the original Kindle. I don't even have, the what I call the nice tablet version. I love my original Kindle. There's no reason for me to change it. So I don't even see the pictures. I see them on my phone when I read on my phone.
Yeah.
But for me, I miss seeing a cover sometimes. So, and this version you're going to hold up, I remember seeing this.
Okay, so we're going to hold that up in a minute. Let's talk about the moth, because that's what you talked about. So I think it's a moth.
Right.
Other people said it's a butterfly, and I'm not. Who's the insect? Is it an anyway? There's a word, isn't there, for a bug expert, and I'm not one. I think it's a moth. And if you look at the cover, it is a moth that is right up against a window, a rainy window. And I think it's doing that thing that moths do when they're stuck and they want to get out, and it's kind of fluttering. And so I think it's quite symbolic of feeling trapped, and feeling trapped either physically or emotionally. Yeah, that's what I think it's about.
So who designed that for you?
So a brilliant, brilliant lady called Hannah at Little Brown Book Group designed my cover, and I loved it so much that I wrote to thank her, because it's I think it's beautiful. I have to say, and I've not confessed to this before, that I didn't like it when I first saw it, because it was so different to the first cover.
Yeah.
So I'll do the compare now. So this is the first cover.
Yeah.
Which is very, very different, isn't it?
The first cover, when I first saw it, I just thought that's a Scream mask in there. You know, the Edward. Yeah. And I don't know. I prefer the second cover now. I've now
I do as well. When this one came out, so this is the trade paperback version. So it's the export version, which you can see is a bit bigger than the paperback. And I really loved it, and I loved it because it was completely different to anything I saw on the shelves. And I also loved it because it wasn't gender specific. So I saw that and I thought, yeah, a man could pick that up as much as a woman. And when I first saw this one, I thought it's very feminine. It's, it's very much geared towards women. And I just wasn't sure because it was so different. But within a matter of days, I'd fallen in love with it because it's so evocative and it works so well. And now I look at this one and I kind of, it doesn't feel like my book, because this is the one that's everywhere. But Hannah designed both of them. So it's not a question of an individual designer's, interpretation. It's just different briefs for books at different times.
Interesting. No, I do like to hear the stories behind, like the development and everything like that. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, how is your day structured? I mean, I have a 9-to-5 job. I walk out of my front door, I go to my office, I sit down, I do what I need to do. I then close my books up at 5 o'clock. I walk into the car park, get into my car, drive home, and I come home and I do whatever I want to do. For me, with my writing head on, that feels very restricted. And I don't think I'd be able to write like that, to a structured time scale. And I think this is why I've never actually sat down and written a novel, is because for me, the creative process has to happen. And I can't be told when that is going to be. So my question, the long way around my question is, do you write to schedule, or do you write when you feel creative?
Now that I'm under contract, I write when I have to write. So I think in an ideal world, I'd write when I felt the muse strike me. But if that happened, I might not ever deliver on my contract. So no, well, I pretty much, I do treat it like a 9-to-5 job. I don't write 9 to 5 at all, but that's my kind of, in fact, 9 to 4, 10 to 4 is my working hours. So I take the kids to school at 9 o'clock, and I walk the dog. And while I walk the dog, I start work. So I start to write in my head. I've already set myself a scene to think about, or a chapter, or a character, or a plot problem, but a very clearly defined brief, so that while I'm walking the dog, I'm tackling whatever it is I want to tackle. So if it's a scene, if I think, right, I'm going to write chapter 14, I will look, before I leave the house, I'll look at my synopsis, I'll find out what it is that I'm actually going to be writing about. And then in that hour, while I'm walking the dog, I'm literally writing the words that I'm going to put on the page. And it works really, really well. I do the same if I'm swimming. I have an absolute fear of being unproductive. I mean, pathological fear. I can't stand sitting in the car in a traffic jam, for example, and not achieving anything with that time. So I like to know that I've thought something through. And then it kind of goes wrong. So then I'm sitting at my desk by 10 o'clock, and what I should do is unload what's in my head. But I don't, because Twitter, Facebook, emails, and I'm trying to get to the point where I can ignore all of that and do my writing from 10 o'clock, because that's when it's in my head, and actually that's when I'm working most efficiently. But I find it very difficult to work when I've got admin to do and Twitter and Facebook to answer. So I do a little bit of writing in the morning, but mostly I'm faffing and I'm doing emails and other admin. And then I start to panic and I go, oh my God, it's lunchtime and I haven't done anything yet. So then I start work in earnest at about 2 o'clock, and then I'm writing, and then I must do 1,000 words a day. And at the moment, really, I prefer it if I do 1,500. And I just make myself do it. And quite often the muse isn't there. I know other authors skip ahead and write a scene that works. I can't do that. I have to work chronologically. So
that was going to be my next part of my question is, do you write in order, or do you just I'll do this scene because I feel inspired by it, or I'm going to write this chapter today? But I think you've really answered that.
Yeah, I do. I find it really difficult to write out of order, although oddly enough, I do want to write the final scene from the book I'm writing at the moment. So I might try that. But mostly I write in order, but I do occasionally put massive passages in block capitals where I go, something else needs to happen here. It's got to be much more fast paced and sort out that problem with Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
And then I move on, and I go back and fill in the blanks later.
Right. The only reason I'm asking is because I'm glad you said that about writing the chapter, because I suppose that gives you an idea of where you're going. It's like a journey. You don't just get in the car and you drive somewhere. You always have, a point B to go to. And I remember reading something that, just using J.K. Rowling as an example, she wrote the first chapter of Harry Potter and she wrote the last chapter of whatever book it was going to be. She knew where it was going. It was just writing all those in between bits.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, using that journey analogy actually is brilliant. And I hadn't thought of it like that before. But it is just like that, in that if I was going to drive to Leeds, which is quite a long way from the Cotswolds, I'd maybe print out the directions, and so I'd know which roads I was taking, but I wouldn't know what they'd look like, and I wouldn't know really how long I was going to spend on each one, because I wouldn't know how much traffic there would be, and so I have that skeleton, I have that journey mapped out. But I've got to actually go through it to find out what it's going to look like.
Stage by stage, absolutely. Which leads us on to what do you consider to be, from your experience, the easiest and the hardest thing about writing?
The easiest thing about writing is that it doesn't really feel like a job. I mean, there are aspects of it that perhaps aren't as enjoyable as others, in that you have to work hard, but basically I get paid to make stuff up. I mean, that's just a dream, isn't it? So that the easiest thing is that I'm doing something that I love, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The hardest thing it's, I don't know, because I really do love it. I suppose the hardest thing is that you have to write even when the muse isn't there. So you've got to just sit down and keep bashing words out on your keyboard or with your pencil, and sometimes that they're shit, but you've got to get them down, because otherwise you can't move on to the next bit. Also possibly quite hard is throwing away stuff you've written. So I've just thrown away a book because it just wasn't good enough. It fills
me with dread, though. Sorry, I can't ever imagine doing that. To put it to one side and maybe use it as part of something else.
I know. Yeah, I think. Well, it wasn't bad, but I mean, it wasn't a terrible book, but it wasn't as good as I Let You Go.
Could you ever put it out under a pen name?
No, because I think that's
is that down to integrity?
Yeah, I think so, because ultimately, if you put any book out, however you do it, I could self-publish it, but I would have to promote it. And so I'd have to create a persona to do that. That's a big commitment. That's a lot of work. You can't just put a book out and hope it succeeds, because it won't on its own. You've got to do something. And that energy is far better put into writing a book that's good.
That's it. So, I mean, now you're writing in what I presume is your own name. Just after you saying that is, and when I first met you, I knew you as another name, and I called you this other. I don't even know if you want to mention this, but I called you this other name when we actually met at a conference, and you answered me, and you went,
yeah.
but you do know my name's Claire, don't you? And I went, no, I didn't actually. You know, I've called you this name, Emily. That was it. Yeah, I didn't know whether you want to mention it or not, but it's really interesting that you mentioned that now, because where you came from, or where you started, or where we met was when you were working under another name.
Yes, and so I was Emily Carlisle for a long time.
Everybody's googling that now.
I know. They'll find pictures of my naked bottom in the Guardian.
Oh God, I'd forgotten about that.
Which I thought I'd buried, but now, of course, I've managed not to.
Sorry, you should have known with me.
So yeah, and I wrote under Emily because I'm blushing now, because at the time I was still a serving police officer, and because of the sorts of things I was blogging about, you know, it was all very personal. I didn't want criminals that I'd been in custody with Googling me and reading about postnatal depression, or it was uncomfortable. And I was also writing funny stuff about vibrators and all sorts, and it didn't feel appropriate. It wasn't anything wrong with what I was doing, but it didn't feel appropriate to have the two linked. And so when I started writing for money, when I got my first column and I started writing for newspapers, I was still writing under Emily. And it was fine, but I really wanted to be me. And so when I left the police, I took the decision to go back to my real name, which effectively meant I had to rebrand. So I sort of built this platform under one name, and I had to redo it. And there was a short time where I was a bit worried that I wouldn't be able to do that, but actually it's been fine, and it just happened over a period of a few months.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I mean, like I say, all parts of the journey at the end of the day. And I think you do have to sometimes bite the bullet and make that decision to make that change, especially if you can see how it's working for you as the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next question is, which writers inspire you?
Well, I read a lot. I've just stepped down from running a literary festival, as I mentioned earlier. So I've always read as many of the authors coming to that as possible. In terms of my writing, I think the two writers that really inspired me were Sophie Hannah and Elizabeth Haynes. So Elizabeth Haynes wrote Into the Darkest Corner, which has got one of the best twists I've ever read. She plots immaculately and writes superbly. And then I read some straightforward procedural crime, police procedurals. I read Mark Billingham and Peter James. And then I also read a lot of romantic fiction, the sort of books that are often classed as chick lit. I just read anything and everything.
So what is your comfort read then? Which book would you go back to over and over again? You know, so if you had like a Saturday afternoon, nobody was in the house, just you, and you thought, right, I don't want anything taxing. I'm just going to get this book off the shelf because I know where it's going to go. I know what's coming next, but I just want to read something. What book is that in your world?
Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier. So brilliant book. Brilliant in terms of structure, and I'm obsessed with plot and structure. So it's just a fabulously plotted book, but it's also incredibly evocative. It's got amazing language. The setting is beautifully described. You really are there at Mandalay, and it's just an exquisite book, and I know it inside out. So it is the sort of book that I can pick up, and you know, I might decide to read from the middle, or I might just read the last chapter, and it doesn't matter.
That's what I mean about having this comfort read, where you just literally, and sometimes the book can fall open, you know, and you don't get that with a Kindle. And again, sometimes that's exactly what I miss, is the dog-eared book. I mean, I've got a few books under my bed just here that are my never throw away books. They will never ever be going anywhere else, and they will literally just do this, and they'll open at my favorite passage or whatever. The spines are broken and everything, but I think that's what books are for. They're for writing in the margins, they're for underlining. Yeah.
I agree. Are you a page turner?
Yeah, bending the corners over. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And the thing is, this is what I like about a Kindle, is because people will, if you have it on public, you'll be able to see people's notations and marks, and they've marked off their favourite parts of the.
Do you not find it interesting, though, on the Kindle that people highlight the same passages? Do you think that they are highlighting them of their own volition, or are they highlighting them because everyone else has highlighted them?
Possibly a bit of both, actually. I have, when I'm reading a book, I'll probably read a chapter, and if there's something I want to highlight, I'll have it on private, and I'll highlight stuff because I want to go back to it, or I want to research something that's been mentioned in the book, or I want to maybe use it as inspiration for something, even just write about it in a blog post. But then I turn public on, and I have highlighted the same things. But I think this is, if I compare this to something that is tangible in my world, it may sound really weird, with music, and we have the radio on in the office, and it's just background music. It's just one of those nondescript commercial radio stations, and they play a modern song and then they play an old song, and it flips backwards and forwards like this all day. And I sit and listen, and I can hear everybody in the office all singing along to the same odd line here and there, and it's not necessarily the crescendo in the song, and it's not necessarily the parts that everybody would sing, it's not the chorus, but there's this general community part of a song, and I can't think of any other way to put it, where
there's a certain refrain that,
yeah, exactly. And it's, like I say, it's not the chorus, it's just like people are going dun, 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 and then everyone will all sing the same song, and then everyone will go quiet again, and another song will come on, and it's the weirdest thing I've ever heard, and I've never noticed it before because I've never been in an office situation where we've been allowed the radio on in the background. And I'm thinking, this is weird. And I think now, looking at a Kindle and the notations and the bookmarks in that, it's a very similar thing. And I'm wondering if subconsciously authors make this happen because those are the important parts of the books, and those are the parts of the books that need to be discussed or need to be thought about or need to be recapped over, or just the bits that people want to talk about.
And now, I think that's fascinating. It also, your workplace sounds like my idea of hell, because I could not bear to be with people that suddenly burst into communal talk. I'm also really, really intrigued to know if anyone's highlighted anything in my book, and if so, what it is.
I'll let you know later on. I'll flick the public on my Kindle. I'll find out for you.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I wonder if it's the bits that I think should be highlighted. That would be quite cool.
But yeah, going back to paperbacks, definitely. I have a pen or a pencil at the side of me. I dog ear the corners. I have to bend the spine back because I want it to lie flat in my hands. I'm the same. There's a book down there available that I could reach, but I'd literally have to dig around under the spare bed. No,
I'm the same. I like books to look as though they've been read.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what they're there for at the end of the day, isn't it? So, I'm very aware that we've been yakking on for half an hour here. We've not lost any viewers so far, which is a bonus. I wanted, what are you reading at the moment? That was going to be my next question.
Well, do you know what? I'm reading something that I might not have read had I not been sent it. And if I hadn't have read it, that would have been a shame. So I am reading this. All She Wants. It's just brilliant. It is so funny. So I don't know if you know Jonathan Harvey. He's a screenwriter. You'll find him on Twitter. He's really funny on Twitter, and he writes. He wrote things like Gimme, 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 and I want to say EastEnders, but I'm not entirely convinced about that. But popular TV stuff. And this is, I think, his third book. And it's really, really funny. The Secrets We Keep, it's about a woman whose husband disappeared 5 years ago, went out for a pint of milk, and never came back. And it's written from the wife's point of view, the son's point of view, who is a gay man in his 20s, I think, early 20s, and the teenage daughter, who's 16. And he captures the voices so brilliantly. So you've got this 16-year-old with her kind of OMG voice. It's so refreshing and so unlike anything I've ever read. And it comes out, I think, July. I'm trying to find out when it is, but soon. Oh, August, 13th of August.
So that's one to stick on the preview Kindle list then, is it?
Yeah, do. Secrets We Keep, Jonathan Harvey, absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. Right. Which brings me to my last question before we disappear. I want from you 3 top tips that you'd give a writer of any age. I mean, I've just been listening to the Radio 2 500 word challenge, is it, for the under is it under 15, under 14s, under 15, something like that. And I am fascinated that, you know, they have the wide age range of entrants, and everything is so intelligently written. And I don't think we're losing our children's involvement in writing and creativity or anything like that. But I do think that some parents may use a computer as an excuse or as a babysitter, and that's, you know, that's not me being closed-minded about it or anything. That I just think it's the way the world is developing, and I think there are some teachers out there and some parents out there who draw creativity out of children, and that shows in that 500-word challenge. There's also Julia, who is part of our blogging community, and I have lost touch with her for a little bit. She was doing the 100-word challenge, but she does it for children as well. And she does, I know an awful lot of primary schools join up with that, and they get sort of like the year sixes doing one every week. So a whole class of year sixes do it, and they all link up to Julia's 100-word challenge. And I think that type of thing needs to be kept, and it needs to be captured and things like that. So we get, I mean, like we were talking before about, you shared a picture on Twitter yesterday of your children all writing. It's half term, they're all writing their own little stories, and I thought that was so gorgeous. And again, creative. So we need to capture that creativity at the beginning, and we need to be able to see right through to whatever age. So 3 top tips for writers of any age, please.
Oh, God, I'm not sure. See, writers of any age, that's a tall order. Okay,
writers. I wasn't going to make it easy for you, was I?
Any age, to write, not necessarily every day, but to write regularly. So to decide what your target is, and it might be you're going to write 500 words every day. It might be you're going to write twice a week, but stick to it, and write through those times when you think you can't find out, you don't feel inspired, because actually it's hard graft, and the sooner you get used to working to a deadline and working to a target, the better. So, you know, do half an hour a day or half an hour a week or whatever your target is, but do it religiously. Secondly, and I'm not sure how this applies to children really, but
not necessarily children, but, you know, I mean,
writers roughly of every age and of every stage is to network. And I think networking is too often treated as a dirty word. I think if we replaced networking with socializing, we'd all be much happier with it, and that's basically what it is. So, you know, talk to people. Go on.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, using the children as, you know, the example there, they have to network to have experiences. So they you know, to have something to write about. So absolutely anybody can use that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just get out, do things, talk to people, tell people you're writing, and that's a really hard thing to do. And too often writers keep that to themselves. But actually, in fact, I was thinking earlier today about the fact that all of the opportunities I've had in relation to writing, whether it's journalism or books, have been pretty much through personal connections. It hasn't been through the traditional method of submitting to agents and taking rejections and trying again. I'm a big believer in making those personal contacts. And then my third suggestion, my third tip is about a social media presence. It's about an online platform, which is getting increasingly important, nay, essential for any writer. And so I don't think you can think about that too early, whether you're building one or whether you're containing one, and containing your online reputation is just as important as building one. And so, yeah, if you're 16 or 65, you need to make sure that what's online is professional and is something that you would want an employer or an agent or an editor to see, because the chances are when you do submit to a literary agent, they will Google you and they'll have a look. And if you haven't got any presence at all, that's a bit of a red flag. And if you've got a presence and it's the wrong kind of presence, then that's a mistake too.
Yeah, I've said that before about any type of job. I've been on an interview panel and I've looked at the applications coming in, and whilst you don't, you know, you can't have any prejudice before the interview, you do Google that person and you do sort of see who they are, where they've been, what they've been doing. And again, going back to the thing about being, you know, doing things in your own name. is very important, you know, that's there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I want to finish on is what's next. I've seen a picture that you shared with your desk and a map of the London Underground over the top of it. And I've seen you tweet something about you immersing yourself into this because your next book is set in London. So have you got any clues for us?
Yes. Okay. So my next book. So yeah, that's in my office. I'm not in my office at the moment because I'm painting it. My next book is set in London, largely on the Underground, and it is basically about the fact that if you are a commuter, you do the same thing every day. You probably do exactly the same, Nikki. You probably drive the same route to work, leave the house at the same time, get to work at the same time. People who work in London will stand on the same place on the platform so that the doors open, so that they get off at a particular exit. They pick up a copy of Metro from the same stand every day. And it's about the fact that doing the same thing every single day puts us at risk, because if you know what you're doing every day, so does someone else.
Yeah. Ooh, and on that note, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Right, absolutely, Clare, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And like I say, we've rambled on for 35 minutes, and I'm sure we could do another 35 minutes if, you know, we really, really wanted to. But I think that's, you know, possibly another hangout for another time.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. And as I say, what I'll do when this goes up on YouTube, I'll put all your links in the description bar so that people can find them. And I am writing a blog post about this on Friday, which will have an excerpt from your book in it. And you're on blog tour at the moment, aren't you? Do you just want to explain a little bit about, there's a poster on the Hangout page here, but do you just want to explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been a bit greedy and I've had 2 blog tours actually. So when a book comes out nowadays, a lot of authors do virtual tours. So they visit different blogs every day and they do an interview or answer a Q&A or whatever really. And I had one of those among the book blogger community, but because of my roots, because of the fact that I came from the parent blogging community, and I felt very strongly that it was the parent blogging community that had given me my initial online platform, I wanted to do a mini blog tour with the parent bloggers that I knew of old that were really important to me. And so we chose 5 that I particularly wanted to be involved with, and we chose half term as being an appropriate time for a little parent blogger book launch tour.
Brilliant. That's all that needs to be said. Like I said, I've got all the details over on my Google Plus page for that. I've shared them also on Twitter and on my Facebook page. Like I've just said, I'll leave all the links down below. You can buy Clare's book in the shops and on Amazon at the moment, and look out for the next one. I'm so intrigued with that. But thank you very much, Clare. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nikki.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye, everyone.